Tonight is really a celebration of the culmination of a nearly 2-year project between Peter and me, which has brought together Peter's great expertise as a former pioneering human resources director and a former director of the Future Work Forum at Henley, and my many years of researching and writing both at the FT and since on corporate culture, on new ways of working and on the changing workforce. Tonight really is about the transformation of work, and the transformation of work is really, in the digital age, is really, we feel, on a par with the enormous changes that took people off the land and into factories in the Industrial Revolution. There are many very powerful forces that are driving this change in the way that we work. The first of them is demographic and social changes. Things like the rise of women in the workplace, in the workforce, the important role that women are playing, the longer working lives that we all face, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your point of view, because of the ageing of the population. The fact that there are changing attitudes amongst many men in terms of their attitudes towards work and family life, and wanting to be parents as well as workers and breadwinners. And of course the digital generation that's coming into the workforce that really has grown up with technology and really expects to work in a very different way from before. We feel that, that conventional flexible working arrangements as they currently exist in many companies, and of course they don't exist in some companies even yet, are really a stopgap on the way to the transformation of work. And what they do is they just tinker at the edges of the current model of work, but they don't actually change or challenge fundamentally the current model of work. There is a huge gap, we feel, between those organisations that are really at the forefront and leading change and those who are probably the mainstream, who are still stuck with a 19th or 20th century model of work that is basically based on fixed time, on fixed location, on hours rather than results. And of course the hours have become longer and longer as technology has just been pasted on top of the current work model. And it's also about a perception that management is in control of people. That is a perception, it's probably an illusion actually, but there are a lot of managers who still feel that, that if they can see people and they're there in front of them, they can see their team, then they know that they're working, and if they can't see them, they don't. And why are we stuck with this problem? When we've got the technology that enables us to do things in a completely different way? Well, we're stuck with the problem because of a combination of things. There's the inertia inside a lot of organisations that really sort of, you know, why do we have to change? It's too difficult to change. This is the way we've always done it, so let's go on doing it this way. Crucially, management fear. Management fear of losing control of people, or of losing status actually as well, because they think that, you know, if they can't see people, they can't control them, then they don't have a job anymore. They'll be putting themselves out of a job. Then we also feel there's a lack of leadership in a lot of organisations, that there's a lot of good work that goes on, perhaps in the middle of organisations, really trying to change things, but the people at the top actually don't get it, and nor do they model it in any sense at all. And the final thing is a lack of a really good understanding of the business case for doing this. So this is really detrimental to business today. In the work that we've done and talking to many companies around the world, many organisations around the world, those that measure this, measure the impact of new ways of working, and there aren't enough of them yet, I have to say, those that measure it really do see an incredible range of business results. They see an increase in productivity when people can work in the way that works best for them as well as the business. They see a reduction in costs because of a reduced business travel, because you can cut office space when people are working more remotely. all of those sort of things. They see faster access to markets because they're more nimble with their people, because their people are more nimble. They see an extension very often of customer service because actually people working at different hours can cover a larger part of the day. And they see things like lower risks of business disruption when there's a crisis that happens. And crucially also, they see greater morale in their people, they see more initiative taken, they see people actually wanting to find solutions and lead change themselves because they've been given responsibility. They are much more motivated. So they have that what it's about. The importance of leadership in all of this absolutely can't be overstated. We also need new and more diverse styles of leadership for the new world of work. And this is something which really plays to what we would call female strengths. We call them female strengths rather than women's strengths because actually men can have them too. But it really is, that is really and also an important part of the book, because actually these new ways of working can lead to much greater diversity, not just within an organisation, but right at the very top. And so our book is really aimed at leaders and managers who want to equip themselves with the thinking and skills to meet the challenges and the opportunities of the new world of work. And before I hand over to Peter, who's going to be talking more about the research we did on culture, on organisational culture, I just want to read a very short extract from the first chapter of the book. A fresh approach to leadership is essential if organisations are to break free from the old rules of work. In our research for this book, we found a small but growing band of leaders who've had the courage to challenge and change these rules, not only by encouraging future work in their teams, but also by remodelling their own career and work patterns. Future work is for everyone. Indeed, it's important that leaders, including those responsible for running large businesses, show how it can be done, as they are the most powerful agents of change.
And so what we decided to do is try and analyse where culture comes from. How do you see it? So one of the things we looked at was the workplace itself. If you can see an office where people work, or a physical building, you can tell something about it. So whether it was Microsoft in the Netherlands, Unilever in Germany, or Vodafone in the UK, they're all good examples of where you can tell there's a kind of open, democratic, flexible culture because of the way that people work and the physical layout. And also we can see that the workplace of the future is moving much more towards a meeting place rather than a building full of static desks. We thought we need to get to grips with what culture means a bit more. So we actually came up with a model of 25 different characteristics that make an organisation culture, covering things like the values in the organisation, the leadership style, management practices and decision-making processes. And we came up with two distinct lists. One was the traditional top-down command and control, do what you're told kind of culture. And the second one was the empower, trust culture that we were seeing in some of these more successful 21st century organisations. So we put these together in two lists, A and B, and as Alison said, then did a survey of something like 366 middle managers, primarily people from the alumni of Henley and Cass business schools, these are people with MBAs, and asked them to compare their organisation between these two lists. So we got very creative. We said, well, this is list A and this is list B. What should we call this new style of culture? So we pleased to know we christened the old one type A and the new one type B. So if you hear people talk in the future about a type B culture, you heard it here first. I'm sorry we didn't come up with anything that much more imaginative. But what was very fascinating was we asked people in the survey to look at their current organisation and then look at what their ideal would be. And on all the 25 factors, these managers said, we would like our organisation to be much more like type B than type A. So there's a kind of built-up demand amongst middle managers for changing the culture of the organisation. So we thought, now, how do we take this type A and type B culture and turn it into something more practical? After all, this is a book we hope managers will be able to take and actually use. So we came up with some principles, which we call the trust principles. I suppose as a consultant, I've often been accused of using three-letter acronyms to kind of explain everything. I mean, you always go, this is an answer for something. Like all good business books, we come up with something which actually is a five-letter acronym, TRUST, spelling trust. Okay. What we've done then in the book with the trust principles is also added the skills that managers need in order to put them in place and the practices that support them. So it's a reasonably practical book in that sense. And then finally, we've taken a look over the horizon to say, what's the world going to look like in the future? And we've seen that organisations probably in the future are going to be getting closer to some model of work which looks a bit like self-employment, where individuals are given responsibilities, measured on results, and allowed to work the way they want to. In fact, the best ones will be those that can combine the combination of the best things of self-employment with some of the security and career opportunities maybe of employment. But we see these things blurring, so there'll be less distinction between the two. Being an employee might look a bit like being self-employed. And then the other big thing, I think, is the environment, where I think environmental issues are going to impact work practices more and more because young people are looking at their employers and saying, we want you to work in a green way. So I think there's going to be less commuting, probably more remote working, more work hubs and different places that work gets done. So to finish, what I want to do is just read a few words from the final chapter that kind of summarise some of the things we've been saying. We're still in the early stages of the transformation of work, largely because corporate cultures and management styles are not keeping pace with technological advances. This was why we embarked on this book, to help managers and organisations make the necessary shift to more efficient business, better lives, and a healthier earth for the next generation to inherit. Future work is one of those rare opportunities for all-round benefit. As we've shown through numerous examples in this book, it contributes positively to the bottom line while improving the lives of workers and helping to protect our fragile ecosystem. It's not an option for business any longer. It's a matter of staying competitive.